Commander Vex Prime floated in her command pod, all four of her optical sensors focused on the holographic display before her. The data streaming across the translucent screen should have been routine. Should have been boring, even. But instead, it made her auxiliary breathing apparatus wheeze with what her species called anticipatory dread. "Ma'am," her tactical officer, Subcommander Kryn, announced with barely concealed excitement, "the human specimen has been secured in testing chamber 12. Vex Prime's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement if she weren't so utterly convinced this was going to end badly. Specimen. Right. Because calling Captain Elena Vasquez a specimen worked out so well for the hegemony of Kythera last cycle. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what happened to Kythera. Everyone knew their entire military fleet had been reduced to scrap metal by a single human female armed with nothing but a broken maintenance tool and what she called creative problem solving. "This is different, Commander," Kryn insisted, his dorsal fins rippling with confidence. "Our containment protocols are far superior. The testing chamber is constructed from quantum-locked duranium. The human cannot possibly escape." Vex Prime turned 3 of her 4 eyes toward her subordinate. The 4th remained fixed on the display showing their specimen, pacing back and forth in her cell like a caged predator. "Subcommander, in my 200 cycles of service, I have learned one universal constant about humans. When you say they cannot possibly do something, that's precisely when they do it. Usually with explosive results." Dr. Zil-97 drifted into the command center, his research robes billowing behind him in the artificial atmosphere. His excitement was palpable, radiating from his bioluminescent patches in rapid, colorful bursts. "Commander. The experiment is ready to begin. This will be the most comprehensive study of human combat capabilities ever conducted." "Combat capabilities," Vex Prime repeated slowly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Doctor, you do realize that every previous, comprehensive study of human combat capabilities has resulted in the researchers becoming the subject of study themselves. Usually posthumously." Dr. Zil-97 waved a dismissive tentacle. "Those were crude experiments conducted by primitive species. We are the Nexari Collective. Our technology is centuries ahead of anything humans have encountered." On the display, Captain Vasquez had stopped pacing. She was now examining the walls of her containment cell with the sort of methodical attention that made Vex Prime's scales itch. The human's dark eyes moved systematically across every surface, every joint, every microscopic imperfection in the supposedly impenetrable chamber. "Doctor," Vex Prime said carefully, "remind me again why we captured this particular human." Captain Elena Vasquez, age 32, former military engineer turned independent freighter captain. She has single-handedly disabled 17 different alien military vessels using improvised tactics and repurposed equipment. Her psychological profile indicates exceptional spatial reasoning, mechanical aptitude, and an almost pathological refusal to accept defeat. "And you thought it would be a good idea to lock her in a room and poke her with sticks?" "Scientifically calibrated energy prods," Dr. Zil-97 corrected with academic pride. "We need to understand how humans achieve such remarkable combat efficiency despite their biological limitations. Their muscle density is unremarkable. Their bone structure is relatively fragile. Their sensory organs are primitive compared to ours. Yet they consistently defeat species that should, by all logical parameters, be superior." Vex Prime's mandibles clicked again, this time definitely not in amusement. "Perhaps the answer is that logic doesn't apply to humans." On the screen, Captain Vasquez had moved to one corner of the chamber. She was now running her fingers along what appeared to be a perfectly smooth wall junction. To the casual observer, she might have been giving up, resignedly feeling for any possible weakness. Vex Prime knew better. The human was mapping the chamber's construction with the same systematic precision that had made her species the most unpredictable variable in galactic politics. "Beginning Phase 1, Dr. Zil-97 announced, manipulating the control interface with practiced ease. Introducing mild gravitational fluctuation to test subject response. The gravity in the testing chamber increased by 15%. Most species would stumble, become disoriented, perhaps panic. Captain Vasquez simply adjusted her stance and continued her examination of the walls. Her movements became more deliberate, but showed no signs of distress. Interesting, the doctor muttered, increasing the gravity to 25% above standard. Human adaptation is remarkably rapid. Doctor, Vex Prime said quietly, what exactly is the objective of this experiment? To determine the source of human combat effectiveness through controlled stimuli and observation of adaptive responses. And what do you plan to do with this information once you have it? Dr. Zil-97 paused, his bioluminescent patches dimming slightly. Well, presumably, we could develop countermeasures, or perhaps improve our own military capabilities. Vex Prime's tone could have frozen methane. So we're conducting military research on a captured enemy combatant. That's not an experiment, Doctor. That's an interrogation. And humans have very specific opinions about being interrogated against their will. On the display, Captain Vasquez had found something. She was now focused intently on a small section of the wall near the floor. Her fingers traced patterns that were invisible to the chamber's sensors but apparently meaningful to her enhanced human pattern recognition. Phase 2, Dr. Zil-97 continued, either not hearing or choosing to ignore Vex Prime's warning. Introducing atmospheric pressure variation. The air pressure in the chamber began to fluctuate in carefully calculated intervals. This should have caused discomfort, difficulty breathing, possible unconsciousness in extreme cases. Captain Vasquez glanced up at the air circulation vents, spent approximately 30 seconds analyzing the pattern, then returned to her examination of the wall junction. She's ignoring it, Sub-Commander Kryn observed with confusion. The atmospheric manipulation should be causing significant distress. She's not ignoring it, Vex Prime corrected. She's cataloging it. She's learning how our systems work. Dr. Zil-97 increased the pressure variations. Captain Vasquez sighed audibly, pressed her palm flat against the wall section she'd been studying, and spoke her first words since being captured. Seriously? Her voice carried clearly through the chamber's audio pickups. Pressure torture? That's your opening move? I've been in commercial airlocks with worse atmospheric control than this. The doctor's excitement bubbled over into rapid, multicolored light patterns. Remarkable. Despite physical stress, the human maintains verbal defiance. This confirms the psychological profiles indicating exceptional resistance to coercion. She's not under stress, Vex Prime pointed out. She's bored. Captain Vasquez had moved to a different wall section and was now tapping rhythmically against specific points. The tapping followed a pattern that made no sense to Nexari analysis algorithms but was clearly meaningful to the human. Phase 3, Dr. Zil-97 announced. Direct neural stimulation via targeted electromagnetic pulses. Doctor, no. The electromagnetic pulses designed to cause disorientation and confusion began broadcasting into the chamber. Captain Vasquez froze for a moment, tilted her head as if listening to something, then smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Oh, that's cute, she said conversationally. You're trying to scramble my neural pathways. Unfortunately for you, I spent 6 months on a cargo hauler with a broken EM shield. This feels like a light massage compared to solar storm exposure. She returned to her systematic examination of the chamber walls, now working faster. The electromagnetic pulses, rather than hindering her, seemed to have provided some sort of additional information. Commander, Sub-Commander Kryn said nervously, should we increase the pulse intensity? Absolutely not, Vex Prime replied firmly. Doctor, end the experiment. Now. But we're just beginning to gather useful data. On the screen, Captain Vasquez had stopped moving. She stood perfectly still in the center of the chamber, her head tilted at an angle that suggested intense concentration. Then she nodded once, as if confirming something to herself, and walked deliberately to the exact center of the room. "End the experiment," Vex Prime repeated, her voice carrying the full authority of her rank. "Release the human immediately. Commander, with respect, the scientific value of this research far outweighs any potential risks. The containment chamber is absolutely secure." Captain Vasquez raised her voice slightly, apparently addressing the chamber's monitoring systems directly. "I know you can hear me. I also know you think this chamber is escape-proof. Here's the thing about quantum-locked duranium construction, it's only as strong as its weakest structural interface." She walked to the corner where she'd begun her examination, placed both hands against the wall junction, and continued speaking in the same conversational tone. "Your electromagnetic pulses gave me a beautiful three-dimensional map of this chamber's internal structure. The neural disruption frequency you used happens to match the harmonic resonance of quantum-locked molecular bonds. Which means," Captain Vasquez pressed against the wall junction in a specific sequence, each pressure point corresponding to structural stress indicators only she could detect. "Every pulse you sent was actually weakening your own containment system." The wall exploded outward, not catastrophically. Not dramatically. It simply ceased to exist as a barrier, the quantum locks releasing simultaneously and allowing the duranium panels to separate cleanly along their construction joints. Captain Vasquez stepped through the opening into the corridor beyond, dusted off her hands, and looked directly up at the security camera. "That wasn't an experiment," she said clearly. "That was reconnaissance. Now you've taught me how your technology works, shown me your facility layout, and demonstrated that you're willing to conduct military research on prisoners of war." Her smile was no longer pleasant. It was predatory. "My turn." The security cameras throughout the facility began flickering and going dark, one by one, as Captain Vasquez disappeared into the maintenance corridors of the Nexari research station. "Commander," Sub-Commander Kryn whispered, "what do we do now?" Vex Prime stared at the empty chamber where their specimen had been contained just moments before. The quantum-locked duranium walls that had taken their engineers 6 months to construct lay neatly disassembled, as if taken apart by someone who understood their construction better than the builders themselves. "Now," she said quietly, "we find out why they call it humanity. Fuck yeah." The maintenance corridors of Research Station Omega-7 had been designed for Nexari physiology. Wide enough for their naturally buoyant forms to drift through comfortably, tall enough to accommodate their extended sensor arrays, and equipped with atmospheric controls calibrated for their specific respiratory needs. What they had not been designed for was a human who moved through them like she owned the place. Commander Vex Prime watched the security feeds with growing horror as Captain Elena Vasquez navigated the maintenance shafts with impossible efficiency. She moved through the complex three-dimensional maze as if following a map, turning at intersections without hesitation, avoiding automated security sensors with casual precision. "How is she doing this?" Sub-Commander Kryn demanded, his dorsal fins now flat against his back in distress. "The maintenance corridors are deliberately confusing. Even our own engineering teams need navigation guides." She memorized the facility layout from the electromagnetic pulse scan, Vex Prime replied grimly. When Dr. Zil-97 tried to scramble her neural pathways, he accidentally gave her a complete three-dimensional blueprint of our station. Dr. Zil-97's bioluminescent patches had shifted to a sickly yellow-green color. "That's impossible. No biological neural network could process and retain that much spatial data from a few seconds of electromagnetic interference. Doctor, you've spent your entire career studying what humans cannot possibly do. How's that working out for you?" On the remaining functional monitors, Captain Vasquez had reached what appeared to be her destination, the primary power distribution hub. She examined the access panel with the same methodical attention she'd given to her prison cell, running her fingers over the control interfaces. "Oh no," whispered the station's chief engineer, floating up to join the group. "Those are the main power conduits. If she disrupts the primary flow," Captain Vasquez spoke to the security camera she had somehow located despite it being camouflaged within the hub's structural framework. I want to talk to whoever's in charge. Not the science team. Not the research coordinator. The actual military commander of this facility. She placed her hand on what appeared to be a decorative panel but was actually the emergency power cutoff switch. A switch that should have been impossible for a non-Nexari to identify, let alone reach. You have 30 seconds to respond before I start exploring your power grid. Vex Prime activated the communication system. This is Commander Vex Prime. I'm listening. Thank you. Here's the situation as I see it. You've committed an act of war against the human colonial defense force by capturing and experimenting on one of our officers. Normally, this would result in a formal declaration of hostilities, diplomatic protests, and eventually a rather unpleasant military response. Captain Vasquez's tone remained conversational, almost friendly. Which somehow made her words more terrifying. However, I'm willing to consider this a misunderstanding. Provided you make some immediate policy changes. What kind of changes? Vex Prime asked, though she suspected she already knew. First, you're going to release all human prisoners currently held at this facility. All of them. Don't bother pretending you only have me. Your power grid configuration indicates detention facilities for at least 12 individuals. The commander's optical sensors swiveled to focus on Dr. Zil-97, who was now glowing a distinctly guilty shade of purple. Doctor. How many humans are you currently studying? Well, there might be a few additional subjects for comparative analysis. How many? 15. Captain Vasquez continued as if she could hear their conversation, which she probably could through the station's internal communication network. Second, you're going to purge all research data collected through non-consensual human experimentation. Everything. Every scan, every analysis, every cute little theory about human combat effectiveness. That represents years of scientific research. Dr. Zil-97 protested. That represents years of war crimes, Captain Vasquez corrected cheerfully. Third, and this is the important one, you're going to broadcast a formal apology to the Human Colonial Defense Force, explaining that your research program was unauthorized, unethical, and has been permanently discontinued. She paused, then added with obvious amusement, I know that last one stings a bit. But trust me, it's better than the alternative. And what exactly is the alternative? Vex Prime asked, though she had a sinking feeling she didn't want to know. The alternative is that I turn your research station into a practical demonstration of human combat effectiveness. Starting with your power grid, moving on to your life support systems, and finishing with your communication arrays. Then I sit here and wait for the Colonial Defense Force to arrive and collect me. The implications hit everyone on the bridge simultaneously. Without power, life support, or communications, the station would be helpless. And when the human military arrived to collect their missing officer, they would find a disabled Nexari research facility filled with evidence of illegal experimentation on their people. That would be diplomatically complicated, Subcommander Kryn understated. Catastrophic, Vex Prime corrected. The Nexari collective would face economic sanctions, military intervention, and complete exclusion from galactic commerce. Captain Vasquez had found another control panel and was examining its interface with professional interest. I should mention that I'm working on a timer here. Your atmospheric recycling system has some interesting vulnerabilities. Nothing immediately dangerous, but in about 40 minutes, the oxygen mixture in your command center is going to become rather sleepy. She's hacked our life support? Chief Engineer Plit7 gasped, his breathing apparatus wheezing in panic. I prefer the term, creatively modified, Captain Vasquez replied. But yes. Consider it motivation to expedite our negotiations. Vex Prime stared at the security feed showing the human casually rewiring their most secure systems with nothing but improvised tools and apparent intuition. Everything about this situation violated the basic principles of galactic civilization. Advanced species did not lose control of their own technology to primitive aliens armed with nothing but determination and mechanical aptitude. "Commander," Dr. ZIL-97 said urgently, "we cannot simply surrender years of research. The military applications alone are worth." "Doctor," Vex Prime interrupted, "let me explain something about humans that your research apparently failed to uncover. They don't fight wars to win. They fight wars to end them. Permanently. Usually by making the cost of continuation so unbearable that their enemies surrender unconditionally." On the monitor, Captain Vasquez had moved to what appeared to be the station's central processing core. She was connecting components in configurations that should have been impossible with their technology. Right now, she's demonstrating that a single human with basic tools can disable our most advanced facility. If we force her to escalate, she'll prove that humans can turn our own technology against us. And when the Colonial Defense Force arrives, they'll have a complete tactical manual for defeating Nexari military systems. The truth of the situation settled over the bridge like a toxic atmosphere. They had captured what they thought was a research subject. Instead, they had given a human military engineer unrestricted access to their most advanced technology and then provided her with motivation to reverse engineer it. The experimental data alone represents a significant investment of resources. Dr. ZIL-97 tried one last time. Captain Vasquez looked directly at the security camera. "I can hear you debating. Let me simplify the decision-making process." She pressed a series of controls on the processing core. Immediately, every non-essential system on the station began shutting down. Lights dimmed to emergency levels. Climate control shifted to minimal power mode. The artificial gravity fluctuated noticeably. "I've just demonstrated that I can selectively disable your station's systems without causing life-threatening damage. That took me approximately 6 minutes to figure out and implement. Your choice now is whether you want me to spend the next 30 minutes exploring what else I can do with your technology." The silence on the bridge was deafening. "Time's running out," Captain Vasquez added helpfully. "And I should mention that I'm getting genuinely curious about your defensive systems. I noticed some interesting power signatures that suggest military-grade shielding. It would be professionally fascinating to see how they interact with modified maintenance equipment." Vex Prime closed all 4 of her optical sensors and made the decision that would probably end her military career but might save her species from diplomatic disaster. "Release all human prisoners immediately. Purge the research data. Prepare the formal apology broadcast." "Commander." Dr. ZIL-97 protested. "Doctor, in the past hour, a single human has escaped our most secure containment, mapped our entire facility, infiltrated our critical systems, and demonstrated the ability to disable our station at will. She has turned what you called an experiment into a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation that could compromise every Nexari military installation in the galaxy." Vex Prime opened her optical sensors and stared directly at the scientist. "So here's a question for your research. What do you think an entire human military fleet could do to us?" The station's systems began returning to normal as Captain Vasquez restored power to non-critical functions. Her voice came through the communication system one final time. "Smart choice. Oh, and Doctor? Next time you want to study human combat effectiveness, try asking nicely. We're actually quite willing to share tactical information with species that approach us as equals rather than test subjects." The security monitors showed Captain Vasquez walking calmly toward the docking bay, where the other human prisoners were being released and their confiscated equipment returned. "She's leaving?" Sub-Commander Kryn asked in disbelief. "She's accomplished her mission," Vex Prime replied. "She's rescued her fellow humans, neutralized a threat to her species, and gathered comprehensive intelligence on our capabilities. All without firing a shot or causing permanent damage." As the human shuttle departed the station, Vex Prime realized that Dr. ZIL-97 had been right about one thing. They had indeed learned something significant about human combat effectiveness. They had learned that humans didn't need superior technology, overwhelming firepower, or numerical advantage. They simply needed to be underestimated by someone foolish enough to give them access to advanced systems and sufficient motivation to figure out how they worked. The research data was purged. The formal apology was broadcast. And Vex Prime spent the rest of her career ensuring that the Nexari Collective never again confused scientific curiosity with military intelligence gathering, because the next human they encountered might not be so diplomatically inclined.